What if I told you there's a place where human existence itself becomes negotiable? Where the very act of staying too long doesn't just threaten your life, but your right to have ever existed at all. Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing cases of architectural horror ever documented, a room that didn't just claim its victims, it erased them from reality itself. This is the story of Room 7 at the Blackwood Psychiatric Institute. In rural Vermont, a place where patients didn't just disappear, they were forgotten by everyone who had ever known them, including themselves. And what makes this story even more chilling is that it might still be happening today. The year was 1953 when Dr. Margaret Holloway first noticed something was wrong. As the head psychiatrist at Blackwood Institute, she was accustomed to the unusual. But what she discovered in Room 7 defied every principle of medicine, psychology, and human memory itself. It started with a patient named Thomas Brennan, a middle-aged man suffering from severe depression. Thomas had been assigned to Room 7 for what was meant to be a temporary stay while his regular room was being renovated. The renovation took longer than expected. 2 weeks turned into a month, and a month stretched into 6 weeks. That's when the impossible began. Dr. Holloway found herself standing in Room 7 one morning, staring at a man she couldn't remember ever seeing before. According to her own records, written in her own handwriting, this was Thomas Brennan, admitted 8 weeks prior. But she had no memory of him whatsoever. Not his admission, not his sessions, not even his face. When she questioned the nursing staff, their responses were equally disturbing. They all had records of caring for Thomas, feeding schedules, medication logs, behavioral notes, all written in their own hand, but none of them could recall actually doing any of it. It was as if their bodies had been moving through the motions, while their minds were somewhere else entirely. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. When Dr. Holloway contacted Thomas's family, his wife of 23 years had no idea who he was. His children, his brother, his lifelong friends, none of them remembered Thomas Brennan. When shown photographs of him, they looked at them with the polite confusion of strangers viewing pictures of someone they'd never met. Most disturbing of all, Thomas himself seemed to be losing his own memories. When asked about his life before the institute, his responses became increasingly vague. His wife's name, his children's faces, his own childhood, all of it was fading like photographs left in the sun. Dr. Holloway, being a woman of science, initially suspected some form of collective psychosis, or perhaps environmental poisoning affecting the brain's memory centers. She ordered extensive testing of Room 7, air quality, mold samples, electromagnetic readings, everything she could think of. The results were normal. Frustratingly, impossibly normal. But the pattern continued. Every patient who stayed in Room 7 for longer than 6 weeks began to fade from memory. Not just their own memories, but the memories of everyone who had ever known them. Dr. Holloway started keeping detailed, obsessive records, photographs, recordings desperate to maintain some proof of these disappearing souls. The case of Eleanor Vance was perhaps the most heartbreaking. A young woman in her 20s, Eleanor had been placed in Room 7 after a nervous breakdown. She was engaged to be married, had a large, loving family, and was a beloved teacher at the local elementary school. Dr. Holloway documented everything about Eleanor's life in excruciating detail, sensing what was coming. After 7 weeks in Room 7, Eleanor's fiancé showed up at the institute, asking why he had received bills for someone he'd never heard of. Her school had no record of ever employing her. Despite having paychecks written in their own accounting department's handwriting, her parents, when contacted, insisted they had only one daughter, not two. Eleanor herself sat in that room, staring at photographs of what had been her life, with the expression of someone looking at a stranger's vacation pictures. The woman she had been was simply gone, leaving behind only a confused shell and a pile of inexplicable paperwork. Dr. Holloway realized she was fighting against something that operated outside the known laws of reality. But she was determined to find an answer, even if it cost her everything. She began researching the history of the building. The Blackwood Institute had been constructed in 1897 on land that had previously housed a small farming community called Middlefjord. The community had been abandoned sometime in the 1870s, though records of exactly when and why were strangely incomplete. What she discovered in the local archives chilled her to the bone. Millfield hadn't been abandoned, it had been forgotten. Census records from 1860 showed a thriving community of over 200 people. By 1880, there was no mention of Millfield anywhere in official records, as if it had never existed at all. But here's the truly disturbing part. Dr. Holloway found personal letters and diary entries from neighboring towns that referenced Millfield residents, relationships, and events, but the writers seemed confused by their own words. One diary entry from 1879 read, "Received a letter today from someone claiming to be my sister Mary from Millfield. I have no sister Mary, and I've never heard of any place called Millfield. Yet something about the letter feels familiar, like a half-remembered dream." The pattern was identical to what was happening in room 7. Dr. Holloway theorized that whatever had consumed Millfield had somehow been concentrated, trapped within the walls of room 7 when the institute was built. But theories couldn't help her patience, and she was running out of time. You see, Dr. Holloway had made a fatal mistake. In her obsession to document and understand what was happening, she had been spending more and more time in room 7. Hours turned into days, days into weeks. She was so focused on saving others that she didn't realize she was becoming the next victim. The last entry in her journal, written in her own handwriting but describing experiences she couldn't remember, read, "I've been studying a fascinating case involving memory loss in patients, but I can't recall the details. My notes suggest I've been working on this for months, but I have no memory of the research. More concerning, I can't remember why I became so interested in this particular room. There's something important here, something I'm supposed to remember. But every time I try to grasp it, it slips away, like water through my fingers." By the time the other staff members realized what was happening, it was too late. Dr. Margaret Holloway had become another forgotten soul, remembered only by her own desperate notes and the few people brave enough or foolish enough to enter room 7 to read them. The Institute tried sealing room 7, but maintenance workers who spent too long inside while installing the barriers began to fade as well. Eventually, the entire Blackwood Institute was abandoned, officially due to budget cuts and changing treatment approaches, but those few who knew the truth understood the real reason. Here's what makes this story even more terrifying. The Blackwood Institute building still stands. It's been sold and resold multiple times over the decades, with each new owner having grand plans that somehow never come to fruition. Current property records show it belongs to a development company that has no memory of purchasing it, despite having signed contracts and made payments. Urban explorers occasionally break into the building, and some have posted photographs online of room 7. What's disturbing is that some of these explorers appear in multiple photos spanning years, but they all look exactly the same age, as if time itself has forgotten to touch them. Local police reports describe finding confused individuals wandering the rural roads near the Institute, unable to remember their own names or how they got there. When these people are reported missing, no one ever comes looking for them. It's as if they'd been forgotten by everyone who ever knew them, leaving them as living ghosts in a world that has no place for them. Perhaps most chilling of all are the online forum posts from people who claim to have visited room 7. These posts always follow the same pattern. Initial excitement about exploring the abandoned institute, followed by increasingly confused updates about finding strange notes and photographs they don't remember taking. And finally, silence. The accounts remain active, but the people behind them seem to have simply vanished from the internet. Their final posts reading like confused fragments of someone trying to remember a dream. The story of room 7 forces us to confront a terrifying possibility that our existence, our very reality, might be far more fragile than we imagine. We assume that once we've lived, once we've made connections and memories, those things are permanent. But what if they're not? What if there are places in this world where the fundamental rules of existence don't apply? The most disturbing aspect of this story isn't the supernatural element, It's the implications for everyone involved. Imagine discovering that you've lived an entire life you can't remember. That you've loved people who no longer exist in anyone's memory. That you've experienced decades of existence that have been completely erased. It's a horror beyond death, because at least death leaves behind memories, grief, and the proof that you once mattered to someone. Room 7 doesn't just kill, it unmakes. It doesn't just take your life, it takes the fact that you ever had one. The next time you find yourself in an old building, pay attention to the rooms that seem a little too quiet, a little too empty. Notice if you find yourself forgetting why you entered, or if you discover photographs of people you don't recognize but somehow seem familiar. And if you ever find yourself somewhere that feels like it's trying to make you forget who you are, remember this story, and get out before it's too late, because once Room 7 claims you, no one will remember to come looking. The question that haunts me most about this story is not whether it's true or false, but whether we would ever know if it happened to us. After all, if everyone who ever knew you forgot you existed, including yourself, would you really be gone? Or would you still be there, trapped in a limbo of unremembered existence, slowly fading until even the evidence of your forgetting disappears? Sweet dreams, and remember, some rooms are empty for a reason.